The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
One thing that is really awesome about doing this podcast is that I get to speak to people from a whole range of different sports. And 86 episodes in, we finally get to speak to someone from the world of squash. I'm delighted to say on this week's podcast, I speak to Jenny Duncalf. She was part of the successful England winning team that won the World Team Championships in 2006. Absolutely wonderful to get to speak to Jenny on this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr. And we cover a whole range of topics, in particular how she grew up around squash, and in fact how a football association ruling stopped her from playing football and ended up leading her to squash. She talks about supporting Liverpool. She also talks about her relationship with fellow squash player Rachel Grinham. Plus, she discusses talking about starting to be a master of ceremonies and a commentator at various squash events around the world. Plus, also her ill-fated appearance in Eggheads. You'll hear all about that on this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr, featuring the squash world team champion Jenny Duncalf. Before we get to that interview, I just want to tell you about Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. Over 180,000 titles for you to choose from. We mentioned football there with Jenny being a Liverpool fan. Well, I've listened to various different sports books. One of my favourites is the book about Zlatan Ibrahimovic. An absolutely fantastic book. And you can download it for free by going to audibletrial.com/best. That's audibletrial.com/best. It's part of a 30-day trial where you get one free audiobook download. Go and check them out. audibletrial.com/best. Let me know what you think of it. All right, let's get on with it. Let's speak to the best in the world. It's Jenny Duncalf.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Jenny Duncalf, welcome to the Best in the World with Richard Parr. So great to have you on the programme. And of course, we're going to talk about all of your life in squash. But I've seen that you've been doing some emceeing and some commentating. How's that been going for you?
Hi, Richard. Thanks for having me, first of all. I've done a couple of stints at the emceeing just in the last few months. I did the British Open in Hull back in March, I think it was. PSA, the Professional Squash Association, just asked me if I'd fancy doing it, and I thought, why not? I'm getting a bit older now, and so I had a go at that, and I think it went down well. It was quite different to what I'm used to, but had some positive feedback, which was nice. And then did a bit at the Women's World Championships in the El Gouna International in Egypt as well after that. So I've had a couple of goes. And hopefully some more.
Oh, fantastic. Because that's one of the things about squash is you do a lot of on-court interviews after matches, don't you? So I'm guessing it was something you're quite used to, just being on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah, I'm definitely a lot more used to being on the other side of the microphone. So it was quite bizarre, but quite nice, because I know obviously all the players pretty well, and a lot of them I'm good friends with. So I think we got a bit of a natural flow, hopefully, to the questions, and I can try and maybe get a bit more of an insight into them as personalities as well, and not just the kind of standard athlete answers, kind of run-of-the-mill stuff.
Mm-hmm. Did you try any gags?
I didn't really go for any gags. So I'm not quite there yet. Didn't try that. I'm not sure I will try that.
I always remember I hosted a jazz event one time at university. It went pretty well, played it completely straight. They invited me back to do it again, and they said, can you try a few gags? And they were just disastrous. They didn't go down well.
Oh, dear.
I think I'll leave it for the stand-up comedians unless you know how to do it. And talking about kind of being on the other side of the microphone and things related to speaking, and one thing I wanted to mention also is you appeared on Eggheads, I saw.
Oh dear, I've tried to erase that from my memory actually.
I haven't seen the episode. How did it go then?
Oh, hopefully it's been deleted from the archives of the BBC. It was a disaster, if I'm honest. So, yeah, this was years ago. The top 5 English female players went on Eggheads. I actually really like quiz programs, and I secretly quite fancy myself as not too bad at them. But Eggheads is tough, and I got lumbered with history, the history category. Went up against CJ, and I didn't get one question right, so and it was multiple choice. So yeah, not our proudest moment as Team England squash players, unfortunately.
Oh, never mind. Well, at least you tried.
But it was an experience. Yeah, we tried.
Exactly, and most probably CJ does wear those very bright shirts, so that might have put you off. I'm
he
go
threw me off. It was distracting.
Something like that. All right, let's talk about your life and career as a squash player. So, when did you first get started in the game, Jenny?
I basically started when I was 9 years old at the club where I'm sat right now, actually, Harrogate Squash Club. I was 9 and I loved sport as a kid. I've got a big brother and we were always messing around in the garden, playing any sport going. I loved football was probably my first love. I used to play for my school and the local team in Wetherby Athletic it was called, and then so I was the only girl in the team. And then at under 10s, once you reached under 10 age group, the FA said that girls weren't allowed to play in any of the teams. So I couldn't play matches on a Saturday anymore, which I was pretty devastated about. And ended up coming down to junior club at the squash club on a Saturday morning instead. And yeah, took it from there really. And I guess the rest is history, I suppose. So a blessing in disguise, maybe.
What was your position at football?
I was right wing or up front.
Okay. And I see you're a Liverpool fan?
Yes, I am. Yeah, still follow football. I used to have wall-to-wall posters of Liverpool players when I was about 8 or 9 or 10. Not so much now, but I still follow them.
Who was your favourite back in the day?
Oh dear. Back then, when I was younger. My brother would always be John Barnes. I quite like Peter Beardsley because he was good at dribbling. And then as I got older, I had a massive crush on Jamie Redknapp. And I used to like Steve McManaman, yeah. Yeah,
Steve McManaman, of course, a right winger as well. Just like you. So what about in the world of squash? As you started to play that more, were there any people you were kind of looking up to?
Yeah, hugely so really. When I was like saying with the football, I loved sport and I loved, I had all the sticker albums and posters and knew who played for England and things like that. So even from football, I was sort of transferring to squash. I was always keen on who the best players in the world were and I'd try and follow them. And luckily for me, I was surrounded, my whole sort of upbringing with squash, I was surrounded by professional players because my stepdad, David Pearson, he's a coach. He was national coach for like 15 years, and and we used to have like world champions staying at our house. So I just loved it. Dinner every night, I'd be sat next to like the best player in England or the world even. So I was pretty spoiled like that. I was lucky to know that. It was possible, definitely possible to have a career as a professional squash player, but also to just be surrounded by that kind of caliber of player and learn so much off just sort of hanging around them, watching them on court. So I always had a few idols growing up.
So when they're round your house for dinner and stuff, was there ever one piece of advice that you really took to heart and really used later in your career?
Not one stands out, to be honest, but I always tell people, or tell juniors now, is just to watch and try and just soak up everything, like kids do anyway, like you are like a sponge when you're a kid, but I basically grew up almost shadowing the best players in the world in a weird way. I'd watch them on court, I'd see what they did at tournaments, so yeah, just watch and learn, and then try and kind of implement that into your own individual style as well. You don't want to completely copy someone. I don't think anyway, but you can take bits from lots of different players and use what you can.
It's interesting you mentioned like what they do at tournaments, not necessarily on the court, but how they conduct themselves just around where the event is. So what kind of things are we talking about here, Jenny?
Just the preparation in terms of before they go on court, do they socialise, what they eat, just little things like that, what rackets they use, what string tension they use. I guess I was probably a bit of a geeky squash player when I was younger and looked up to a lot of them. So I just loved being at tournaments and big events and seeing all the players and what they were like and what they got up to.
Well, that is, you say geeky, but it's definitely paid off because of the success that you've had. So give us an idea then of what your pre-match routine is like, what it's like when you arrive to an event before you actually play your first match.
Well, I'm talking a good game here because I was actually really bad at, when I was younger, I'd watch all the players, but I wasn't the best in terms of preparation. I warm up a lot better and look after myself a lot better now at the end of my career than I did at the start, which sounds quite bad, but luckily, naturally, I kind of got away with not doing too much kind of prehab and looking after my body as well as I probably should have for quite a few years. I didn't get injured, and then once I hit 30, things started going a bit wrong, and I've had to definitely up my game there. So before a match, I'd take myself away probably about 45 minutes to an hour before the match. A lot of the time, you don't know when exactly you're going to be on if you're following on. So a match could go for like anywhere from 35 minutes to 75, 90 minutes. So it's quite difficult at times. You're always warming up near the court and then popping in to see the score. But yeah, I try to take myself away from a sort of busy environment about 45 minutes to an hour before my match. And yeah, start warming up properly about half an hour before.
And then it's go time.
And then it's go time, yeah. Once you just want to get on once you kind of itching to get on court usually. And
what about, obviously, being an international player that you do travel all around the world, and you're playing anywhere from Egypt to Qatar to obviously at home over to America. Do you have any kind of travel routine?
Not particularly. Just try and look after yourself as best as possible. There's obviously a lot of flying, being a professional player. Depending on the countries I go to, I usually give myself at least 2 full days to acclimatise before first round. So Asia, if I'm flying from England, Asia or Australia, sometimes 3 days. But anywhere else, like America, Middle East, I'll give myself 2 full days just to make sure you can get over the flight and settle in, get used to the court, so you get 2 decent hits on the courts that you're playing on, hopefully, before first round. I kind of like the travel though. I'm not bored of it yet. I don't mind. I don't like flying. It doesn't help. I'm not scared of flying. I'm not scared of many things, but I'm not the keenest on bumpy flights. But I kind of like being at airports, weirdly, and I like airport programs, which is weird as well.
Airport programs, such as what?
Yeah, I don't know. I like. I was watching a comedy one the other day it was from years ago. Come Fly With Me, with the guy from Little Britain, and that's really funny. And then just like I found myself watching. Not deliberately, but when it's on TV, I end up watching it like national security border, those border security ones. And
Yeah.
I don't know, weird stuff like that. Definitely not air crash investigation, though. That's one I flicked straight off.
Yeah, no, you don't want to watch that. Nor that movie with Denzel Washington where he kind of lands them upside down. That's not the one you want to watch before a flight. I won't be
watching those, no.
While we're talking about routine, why don't you give us an idea of what a typical training day is like for you, Jenny?
Well, it varies, to be honest. I get asked that a lot, so it's always quite difficult because we have different days every day. So I guess today. So I've used today as an example. Today it's the off season at the moment. We don't have a tournament. I haven't had a tournament. It'll be about 2.5 months. So I'm sort of halfway into my 8-week weights program. So I'll do weights twice a week. So I did weights this morning, but I start with I have a slight hip issue, so I have to do my hip rehab every day if I can. So that takes about 20 minutes at the start of a session. Do my hip rehab, which isn't the most exciting, but has to be done. And my weights today only took about an hour or so. And then I actually just walked on the treadmill for half an hour just for a bit of recovery, just keep the legs loose. And then I've got lunch after I speak to you, and then I've got a hit with a young lad from Ilkley who's on the sort of England academy called Stuart McGregor. So we'll hit for about an hour or so, an hour and a half, doing some routines and condition games. So I tend to, most of my days consist of one on-court session and one off-court session. Off-court will either be strength work or CV work. And then court can be a match, practice, or a coaching lesson or a pressure session or something like that. So the good thing about squash is that there's so much you can work on. There's so many variables within the sport. So there's all sorts you can do, which makes it good fun, I think.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Don't panic, Mr. Mannering. All right, Dad's Army reference there for anyone who might know what I'm talking about. If you're in another country, Google Dad's Army, Mr. Mannering. Anyway, we'll have more from Jenny in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to tell you about Patreon. Patreon's a crowdfunding website. It gives creators the chance to get their projects funded, and we have The Best in the World with Richard Parr on Patreon at the moment. It gives you a chance to give back to our podcast if you enjoy and appreciate what we do, and we're only looking for a contribution as little as $1 a month. If you're in the UK, that's less than £1. And that equals like 25 cents an episode. And of course, you can contribute a lot more. And there are other benefits if you do start to contribute more to our show. Check them all out. It's at patreon.com/best in the world. If you've already supported our show, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Not just for your money, but also for your time by going to that website and listening to all of these podcasts. All right, let's return to the conversation with the squash world's team champion, Jenny Duncalf.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Is there anything that you know now that you wish you'd known when you started playing?
I don't really have. I don't like to have any regrets. So, and I don't think I'd change too much. Perhaps in my done my kind of exercise, my hip stuff, which I'm doing now. Started doing things like that a few years earlier. Because it does catch up on you when you hit 30. Like I say, things are a bit more difficult, and I've never been the best. I've never been the most meticulous of kind of preparers compared to some of the other players, which is pretty bad to say, really.
You mentioned you're going to have some lunch. Why don't you tell me what your lunch will be, and then also give us an idea of what is your typical diet, please, Jenny?
Well, that's a good question, because I embarrassingly forgot about this interview, and I'm hitting at 2:30. So I think I'm going to have to make a mad dash to Sainsbury's and grab something. Which might be, I'm actually quite fancying some prawns at the moment. I personally, I go through phases, but I try to lay off too many carbs, so I try not to eat too much bread and pasta. But then I like rice. I like a lot of sushi. Is one of my favorites. Proteins, just the general kind of meat and veg and fish is pretty dull, really. Eggs, I eat a lot of eggs. And my favorite thing is probably breakfast food. I could eat breakfast food all day and sushi all day.
What type of breakfast food?
Oh, anything. Eggs, poached eggs, smashed avocado with a bit of chili, even a drizzle of honey, bacon, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't eat that every day, but that would be definitely up there. I do enjoy my food, so it's a constant battle not to give in to all the goodness that's out there.
Well, yeah, it's nearly lunchtime. Talking about all that food has made me hungry, so we'll go for a few more minutes, but not too many more, because I think we're both getting hungry now. So obviously you've had amazing success throughout your career, but what is the one standout moment if you had to pick one?
It's a difficult one. I've got a few wins, I guess, that I've enjoyed. I've always actually enjoyed. Sorry, I'm waffling, but yeah, probably my first national title, winning the nationals. I think it was 2007, maybe. It was a long time ago, but that was a big one to tick off the list. Got 3 silver medals in the Commonwealth Games, so they were all great experiences. And I've always loved playing team events, because we don't actually get to do that too much in squash. You spend most of the year as an individual and competing against everyone, so it's always great fun when you come together as a team and playing European team championships, world championships, Commonwealth Games. But also, my biggest win was the World Series event, Qatar Classic, which took me to world number 2. So I'd say that was my standout win for me.
And of course, that was against your partner, Rachel Grinham. Do you remind her about that actually quite a bit?
No, she had a bit of a shocker that day, to be fair. But it was my semi-final. I'd beaten Nicole David in the semi-final of that. So that was a sort of big match, and then I played Rach in the final, which luckily I won. But she's beaten me enough on tour, so I try not to remind her of all the ones I've won.
Recently I spoke to the speed skater Jorrit Bergsma, who's an Olympic champion, and his wife is also I think she's a world champion speed skater as well. What's the dynamic like with both of you being very successful squash players? Does it make everything competitive if you play any board games or anything like that, or is it 24/7 squash? Are you able to kind of not think about the sport when both of you are so heavily invested in it?
Yeah, weirdly enough, board games are actually the only thing that we seem to fall out about. Board games are terrible. But squash-wise, Rach is actually, I think she's quite rare as a sports person, and that she's actually not very competitive, which sounds ridiculous because she's been so successful. She's won the British Open 4 times, been world champion, world number 1, Commonwealth gold medalist. Like, she's won way more than I have. And I think part of that maybe makes her less, because she's achieved so much, there's nothing left for her to achieve. So she's never been that competitive, bizarrely, whereas I've always been competitive. And I remember one time we played in the British Open, we were together, and she'd won the British Open 3 times already, and I would give my right arm to win the British Open. And we played in the semi-finals, and Nicole David had gone out in the quarterfinals, which was like an unbelievable result, and left the tournament like wide open. So it was a huge opportunity to do well, and I lost to Rach in the semi-finals. in a close match, and I could have won. So I think that was probably the worst I've behaved after. And part of me, like a sulky child, thought, why can't you just let me win? But you've got 3 already. And she went on to win the event and won her 4th one. I've still not won one.
Oh.
But yeah, she's not. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely more of a. If I lose to her, it's usually a worse kind of couple of hours after the match than if she loses to me. She's pretty good like that. I'm not so good.
Just a couple more questions. I know you've got to go, but I just want to get a couple more in.
Yeah. That's right.
Nicole David, you mentioned there. Is it frustrating that you had to play in the era that she was involved in? Because she seemed to absolutely dominate the sport for quite a few years.
Yeah, she totally did. No, I don't see it that way. For me, yeah, sure, if she wasn't around, I may have won a British Open or a World Open, or may have won a few more tournaments. But for me, I'm kind of glad that I was in that era, because it's the biggest challenge I could have had, really, and I was tested against the best. And yeah, I mean, she's been the most dominant force in women's squash, arguably ever. So no, I'm glad that I was in the same era as her. I mean, we've grown up together. She's 8 months younger than me, so we've played since we were kids, and she raised her in terms of athleticism in women's squash, and she's still going. Like, she's losing a lot more these days, but she's still such a good athlete and such a model professional as well. So yeah, for me, I don't see that as a negative being in her era, although I could have maybe got a few more trophies.
Well, the one trophy you did get, which you did mention, was the World Team Squash Championship in 2006, and I saw you were meant to be playing the deciding match in that final. Oh
yeah.
And you didn't get to play it because your 2 teammates won the first 2 matches.
Yeah, you've done your research.
When I'm speaking to the best in the world, I've got to learn a little bit about you. So by doing that deciding match, when it didn't happen, was there a sense of relief and joy that you won, or was there a little bit of disappointment that you didn't get to play?
It's the weirdest feeling. Yeah, it's the weirdest feeling. It's basically the most nerve-wracking situation you can be in, is playing a team. There's something different about teams. Obviously, you're representing your teammates and you want to win it so much. So when you're due to go on possibly for a deciding match in a World Championship final, there's so many more nerves, the excitement, and you're up and down, like you're exhausted before you even go on court, really. So that particular event, it was a really close match. It was 1 minute it's looking like I'm going on for the decider, 1 minute we could win, and so I'm in and out, warming up, trying to take yourself away from the arena to calm down a bit. So I was actually not there when I think it was Vicky Botwright won the match. So then I sort of came through in my kit and we'd won, and then it was brilliant. It was obviously we've won, that's we're there to get the trophy. But yeah, I guess there's a bit of you that would want to win the trophy for yourself, like win the deciding match. But I've also lost the deciding match, a very close deciding match in the final, and that's not too much fun either. So you'll take the trophy when you get the chance, I think.
Fantastic. Well, Jen, it's been so good to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time today. Just before you go, can you let us know how we can continue to follow you on social media, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm on Twitter. I think my username's just my name, @Jenny Duncalf. Facebook, I've got an athlete page, again, Jenny Duncalf, and the same for Instagram, @Jenny Duncalf. So, yeah, not too complicated.
Perfect. Well, it's been so good talking to you today on the programme, and thank you for being here and being the best in the world.
Thank you, Richard. Take care.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Lovely talking to Jenny on this week's podcast, and thinking about it, That might be one of the first racket sports champions we've had on this programme, because we haven't had any tennis players yet. I don't think we've had anyone from the world of badminton either. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, Jenny was the first squash player. But never fear, I've got another squash player coming up for you in just a few weeks. You'll just have to wait and see on that. Of course, the World Open is being held in Manchester in December, so I've got a pretty good guest for you leading up to that tournament. If you do enjoy our podcast and do want to go back and listen to some of the archive, which you can do at sportocino.com, which you can do at acast.com/best, and you can do on iTunes and Stitcher, of course. Maybe there's a different sport that you enjoy. Perhaps you like shooting, like clay pigeon shooting. Maybe listen to the fascinating interview with Richard Folds, the clay pigeon shooter. Are you brave enough to cliff dive? Well, we go cliff diving, so to speak, with the world champion Gary Hunt. He's been on the Best in the World with Richard Parr. The Rugby World Cup winner David Campese has been on the programme. They're some of the first few episodes that we've ever done on this programme, nearly 2 years ago, but they still stand as some of the best. So go back and listen to them. All right, that's it for this week's show, this week's Best in the World with Richard Parr. If you get a chance to support our programme on Patreon, go to patreon.com/best in the world. But I'll be back with you with another amazing sporting champion. Goodbye for now.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.